Hi, friends. Have you ever heard of the five stages of grief? I'm sure that you have. I'm John. I'm a certified grief recovery specialist, and I wanted to talk to you about this idea. It's become very popular, I guess, in our society to talk about these five stages of grief. I remember when I was retiring from the Navy, I told my boss that I was moving into grief recovery, and he told me, "Oh yeah, I've worked through those five stages of grief before." And I didn't really have the it didn't really seem like the appropriate time, I guess, to kind of rebut the idea of the five stages of grief. But I think we've all heard about them, at least over a certain age. Actually, even the popular television show, well, long running at least, The Simpsons, they even did a little bit on the five stages of grief. If you remember, I think it was really old. I haven't watched The Simpsons in forever, but there was this early episode where Homer ate this. I think it was some kind of a supposedly poisonous fish. And he went to his doctor and asked him what was going to happen. And the doctor said, "Well, you're going to die, and probably within 24 hours." And then he said, "Actually, more like 22 hours. Sorry for keeping you waiting." A little joke right there. And in the in the video, or in the episode, he said, "You're going to pass through these five stages of grief." And these five stages, he said, first, you're going to deny it. And Homer gets angry. He says, "Why, you little?" And he starts choking him, I think. And he tries to bargain with the doctor. He says, "You got to you have to get me out of this, doc. I'll make it worth your while." And then depression sets in. And then he finally accepts his, "Oh, well, we all got to go sometime." There's another one in there somewhere. And this all happens within about a 30-second window. And it's kind of done for comedic effect. But the reality is, grief is not so neat and tidy. It just isn't. And if we expect that our grief for whatever experience that we have in our life, whether it's a death, a divorce, something like moving, a change in our life, there are so many things that cause grief in our life, and they're much more than just death and divorce. It's not that tidy, and we shouldn't expect it to go like this. And if we do, we're doing ourselves a disfavor. Yeah, I think that's okay. So, does that approximate any experience that you've had in your life, that you've just kind of marched through these phases? When a loved one of yours died, did you deny it? No, they're not really dead. Did you? That didn't make sense. If you lost a job, did you deny I didn't lose a job? If you moved across the country and you missed your family and friends because you don't see them anymore, do you deny that that happened? No, you really don't. That just doesn't make any sense. So in reality, where this idea of the five stages of grief came from is this person named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She wrote a book on death and dying in 1969. So this has been around for what, a good 50 years plus. And as the title of this book implies, the five stages of grief that she introduced, they only apply in one particular circumstance. And that is when we learn of our own impending death, that we might work through those five stages. However, our in our culture, we've extrapolated that to include any kind of grief. Um, yeah. So why should why should we really care? Maybe this just seems kind of like a harmless misunderstanding. And in the case of the Simpsons, had just found out that he was going to die, and so maybe that was actually applicable, right? Or maybe intentionally or not. The problem with this understanding is that it teaches an incorrect and even harmful idea. Um, so, in the Homer Simpson example, he passed neatly from one stage to another in a nice, orderly fashion until everything was mostly okay with him. He said, "Okay, I guess we all got to go sometime." Sure, he thought he was going to die, but at least he was emotionally okay with it. It also perpetuated another false idea, which is time heals all wounds. In grief, we talk about several myths, things that we've kind of been taught throughout our lives. And I'll talk about those in other episodes, I suppose, in other videos. But this one of time heals all wounds, if you just wait long enough, then I'm just going to feel better. Now, the intensity of the pain may wear off to a degree, but the actual emotional, deep seated grief doesn't go away. It's very common for people that have had a loved one die 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, they are still really brokenhearted about it. And and we need to understand that. So, um, you know, with a raise of hands, for all of you that have experienced grief, and that's every single one of us, did you find yourself moving neatly, passing from one stage to another and coming out the other end without any emotional pain? I don't think so. That's not the way it works. That's just not how grief works in reality. So, what is grief really like? Instead, grief is messy, it's long lasting, it doesn't just fade away. Grief lingers. Grief is sparked by special days, like a birthday, an anniversary, maybe a graduation day, or anything like that. Maybe a certain smell that could trigger that could really kind of elucidate some grief or bring it back up again. A change in the weather, seasons, certain holidays, maybe a particular food, maybe a dream or a memory. Really, almost anything can kind of bring that grief up again. And we should expect that. We don't forget the love that we held for somebody else. We don't forget the dreams, the hopes, the expectations of a wonderful future. We don't forget the heartache from our loss. Just because 6 months, 2 years, or 20 years have passed, we aren't over it. And it's really important to understand grief is an expression of love. So, what can we do about it? Is there any hope? The good news is that even though there aren't five neat, tidy, convenient stages that we pass through and then forget about the pain, there is a way to find completion from grief. Through the grief recovery method, we learn the truth about grief. We really spend a lot of time focusing on what these myths are and really understanding the true definitions and the right way of understanding grief. We consider our lives, then we put to use some wonderful tools to find completion from grief. The outcome of working through this process is the ability to remember our loved ones or ones that we hoped would have been loved ones without the pain, but with all the joy. If you'd like to learn more, please reach out to me for a free consultation. You can also go to my website and you can learn more there. And it would be my honor to help you find true healing and completion that may have been on your heart for a couple of months, a couple of years, or even decades. So, next time you think about or you hear this idea of 5 stages of grief, maybe consider that it's just not quite that tidy. Instead, there's other ways of understanding, and I'll talk about those in the future. And have a great day. Thank you.